Editing your raw files doesn't have to feel confusing, frustrating, or overwhelming. And you definitely don't have to touch every single slider or guess your way through Lightroom and Photoshop. In fact, there's only a handful of tools that truly make a difference. In today's video, I will show you 5 sliders in Camera Raw and Lightroom that actually matter and transform your images in seconds. And then I will show you 3 simple masking techniques to fine-tune your photos and take them from good to great. I'm Wegener, and for over 20 years, I've been a professional photographer capturing unique bird photos and videos and teaching all of you to create your own masterpieces. I will use Lightroom today, but since Camera Raw and Lightroom are essentially the same raw processing engine, everything I show you will work exactly the same way in Camera Raw too. And if you want to go deeper with a detailed step-by-step workflow you can apply to all your raw images, check out my Lightroom and Next Generation Photoshop masterclasses. I'll link down there in the description. They will give you everything you need to consistently create amazing results. The image I brought for us today is of an eastern whipbird taken in the deep dark rainforest at ISO 25600. So the overall exposure is a little bit dark, the cheek of the bird is a bit bright, and the overall image also feels a little bit dark and underexposed with a blue cast. I've opened up this image in Lightroom now, and before we start pulling some sliders, there's 2 extra steps I would recommend doing. You don't have to do them, but I think they will dramatically improve the look of your images. First of all, we should go over here on the right hand side where it says Profile and select one of the profiles, either an Adobe one, or if you have my presets, I would recommend using one of my presets. In this case, I would probably go with the Vibrant More Contrast preset, and that already gives me a better starting point. The important thing here is that you don't always use the standard Adobe color profile. Changing these profiles can have a dramatic look on the colors and the overall look of your image, so playing around with some of these and picking the best one is definitely the way to go. And if we zoom into this image, we can also see that it's quite noisy because I took it at ISO 25600, so we should run some noise reduction on it. And the easiest way in Camera Raw and Lightroom is to go to the right hand side, scroll down to where it says Detail, and then click Denoise. And now, depending on your computer, this will take a little while, but in a few seconds we will have a nice and clean file. And we also have a slider available where we can actually now adjust the strength of the noise reduction. And now you can see the noise reduction has done an amazing result and removed a lot of the noise. I think in this case it's almost too much because we're losing a little bit of detail in the darker areas on the bird. So I'm going to the slider here on the right hand side now and just pull it back a little bit, reintroducing some noise to the background, which is fine. It doesn't have to be completely clean, but also giving me a little bit more details in the darker areas. Now that we got rid of the noise and have selected a color profile, it's time to use 2 of the most important sliders in Camera Raw and Lightroom that I like to use together. So what I want to do is first push the brightness or exposure slider up to the right as far as I can, and then I will aggressively pull down the highlight slider, bringing back detail in the bright areas like the bird's cheek. So we can also look at the histogram here on the right hand side and we see there's actually a little bit of a gap. So what we can do here now is go to the exposure slider and just push that up to the point where we feel like that the image looks nice and bright without looking too bright. And now you see some areas are a little bit too bright, especially here on the bird's cheek. So what I'll do next is go to the highlight slider and pull that down to the point where we got a lot of nice detail. Somewhere around -60 gives me a good overall balance of brightness and maintaining the details in the bright areas. Because this bird has a lot of dark areas, we're also going to use the 3rd slider in our 5 slider series, the shadow slider. So we push that up a little bit and you can see that it brings a little bit more detail into the belly and the crest. But we don't want to overdo it because if I go to like 50 or 60%, you can see that now the whole image looks very strange. So we just leave it at around 25 or 30. And these are usually the 3 sliders that are used to balance out my exposure. After I've done that, I now want to adjust my white balance. And there's 2 different ways of doing it. We can either use the picker tool and then select a neutral gray area and click on that. That should give us a good white balance with just 1 click. Or we can manually adjust the white balance and the tint slider. But in this case, because the bird has a nice gray beak, I think we can just go over here to the right hand side, click on that picker tool, go somewhere to the beak, click on that. And that gives us a pretty good white balance overall. And now you could fine tune this with the temperature and the tint slider, but I think in this case it actually looks pretty good already. Number 5 is the vibrant slider. I like to use that much more than the saturation slider because the vibrant slider adds saturation to areas that are undersaturated and leaves areas that are already oversaturated alone. So you bring more punch and vibrant to your image without oversaturating all the colors. And in this case, I think the image doesn't need a lot, but a little bit of vibrance, maybe +10 or +15, will add a little bit of extra life to our image. And that's basically it already. Pretty cool, isn't it? 5 sliders to transform this dark, noisy file into a beautiful, bright and vibrant photo. And if I wasn't talking while I was doing this, I could probably do this in less than 1 minute. Now, of course, we could take this a little bit further and do some more steps like curves or fine-tuning the colors like I also show you in my masterclasses. But today I wanted to keep it simple, and this is something that you can easily apply to all your RAW files. Now, if you like the image the way it is already, you can basically export it now and post it online, for instance. But with most of my photos, I also like to do some adjustments that are not easily done just on a global scale like we've done so far. And that's why I want to show you 3 more very simple masking techniques that allow us to add some creative style to this image and also fine-tune some areas that are still not perfect in the image. If we're editing in Lightroom, we can simply head over to the masking panel and do all our damage there. Whereas if you're using Camera Raw and wanting to edit in Photoshop, I would recommend that you open the RAW file first after making the adjustments with our 5 sliders, then create a copy of the background layer, and then go to Filter, Camera Raw Filter, and then apply all changes like the masking onto that new copy of the background layer. This will give you more control and a better workflow in Photoshop. The first mask I wanted to show you is a very simple one. Either select background or select subject. Now there is one issue with that though, because the automatic masking doesn't always work perfectly well, or it selects areas that we don't want to select, or it doesn't select enough areas. And this is where I want to show you a few tricks how to get a much better mask. So first we go to Add New Mask and select Subject. And we can see that gives us a pretty decent selection of our subject. But when we zoom in, for instance, we can see there's one area around the bird's toe that's over selected. And there's also areas on the beak where it feels like the red of the mask already touches the background as well, which is not great because if we make changes, that will then blend in from the bird onto the background or the other way around, which is not ideal. So here is a crazy little trick that doesn't seem to make sense, but it helps to refine the edge. So far we have selected Select Subject, and now we go over to our mask, click on that mask, we go to Subtract, and we select Select Subject again. Now that kind of removes all the mask except for a little red outline around our subject. Now that's not what we want, but if we now click on that newly created Subtract Subject and go Invert, that now gives us a much better edge on our bird. And you can see this has also now actually gotten rid of the area on the foot that was over selected. But now there might be some areas on your subject that are not actually selected enough, like here on the beak where there is a little gap missing. So if we started to brighten or darken the bird, this area would be left out and it might look quite strange. So one easy way to add or subtract from your selection is to use the Object Selection tool by adding or subtracting it. So I go to Add, select Objects, use a very small size, and then I simply brush over the area that I want to add, and that nicely adds it to my selection. But of course, this also works on a larger scale. Let's zoom out and say we want to now select the bird and the perch at the same time. We might be able to get away with using Select Background and invert that, but then again, that would give us the same issues we already had on the bird's nose. So what I want to do now is simply add the perch to my selection. And we can also do that by going to Add, Select Objects. But this time I don't want to use the brush. It's going to be hard to brush over this whole perch. We also have another option here on the right hand side where we can basically draw a rectangle over our image, roughly selecting the area we want the AI to select. And so I'm just drawing that over the bottom of the image, and in no time that has nicely selected the perch and the bird. However, we can see that it has now over selected the bird's feet again. So we could zoom in, go to Subtract, select Objects, very small brush this time. And we're just brushing over the areas that we don't want to be part of the selection. And you can see within no time now it's removed from our selection. And this gives us a much better selection already, and it's the best way to fine tune your mask if either too much or too little is selected of your background or your subject. And now you might wonder, why do we do a mask like this? Obviously, so we can work on the bird or the background individually. So we could go over here on the right hand side where everything we do will now only happen in the red area. And we could say, let's just brighten the bird a little bit, or let's pull up the shadows on the bird a bit more, or we could invert this mask and then also work on the background individually. The next mask I want to show you is super powerful when it comes to working on your backgrounds. We can add a bit of a highlight in the background, remove too bright or too dark areas, or just improve the look overall in the background. And the tool I'm talking about is the radial gradient in combination with the dehaze slider and the white balance slider, as well as subtracting the select subject from it, so we're only working on the background and not the bird. Let's say I want to give a little bit more life to the background on the upper left-hand side. So I would go into radial gradient, and then we just click down in our image and drag the gradient to a much larger size. And then we also want to make sure that we have a quite big feather. The bigger we make the middle, the harder the feather will be. Whereas what we want is a really soft feather to have a nice glow in the image. Now you can see that parts of the subject are selected and we don't want that. So we go over here to the mask on the right hand side, click subtract, go to select subject. And now you can see we only have this upper right hand side of our image selected. And what I like to do now is to go down to the dehaze slider and pull that back a little bit into the negative area. And that just removes some of the harshness from a certain area. And now that feels a little bit too washed out. So I'm going to go to the white balance slider and increase the temperature, giving me a nice golden glow behind the bird. And the best thing is we're not stuck to a particular area with this gradient, because now we can also click on it. And if we click on the middle, we can also move the gradient around to the point where we feel like it looks really nice and adds a little bit of that extra glow to our image. And these gradients are actually really powerful. And for instance, you can also use them to remove too dark areas in your background. Like let's say we want to get rid of that dark spot here. We create a new mask, radial gradient, just drag that over this spot, go to negative dehaze, balance that out with the white balance slider. And in no time, we have removed the too dark area in our background. And this also works when you have bright areas in your background. And if you want me to show you more of these techniques and many more that will have a dramatic impact on the final look of your raw images, I would recommend that you check out my Lightroom and Next Generation Photoshop masterclasses. In these classes, I teach you step by step and in easy to follow chapters my workflow that you can apply to all your raw images and get fantastic results every single time, even from your most difficult to edit files. But of course, you won't just be watching, because I'm also providing you with my own raw files so you can edit right alongside me. And if you're not sure if my classes are worth it or the right fit for you, check out some of the amazing reviews that I receive on a daily basis from many happy students who I've helped to transform their editing lives, who now love image editing and get great results every time. I know image editing is something that many of you like to avoid or brush aside or think it's not necessary, but with the right workflow and the right tweaks, you can truly transform your raw images, and even dull and boring files can suddenly turn out to be stunners. So if you're fed up with not knowing how to edit your images or how to get the best results from them, my masterclasses will be a great starting point to get you on your way, because I know they will help you a lot to develop that crucial workflow and get great results that will make you very happy. Next, I want to show you a super powerful way to make targeted adjustments to just certain areas on your subject, like the dark belly, for instance. This used to be very difficult in Lightroom, and one of the main reasons that I always used Photoshop, because there with layers and layer mask, it was very easy to just brighten a certain area on the bird. But now we can do this in Lightroom and Camera Raw as well. And here in particular, what we want to do is do a select subject mask and then intersect that with the brush. And that basically allows us to brush only within the selected subject area. So if we brush over the edge, nothing will happen, which is perfect, for instance, if we want to brighten the belly, what we're going to do now. So we're back in our masking panel. We have a few masks already now. So I'm going to create a new mask, and that is called Select Subject. Now there's actually a smarter way to do that, because when I showed you initially how to make a refined Select Subject mask, I shouldn't have deleted it, but rather renamed it and then just hid it. Because what we could have done now is to bring this mask up again or duplicate this initial mask that gives us a refined selection every time we want to use the Select Subject mask, rather than creating a new Select Subject mask, which is a little bit more sloppy now, but in our case, it will still work either way. So in this case, I just used Select Subject, and next we need to click on that mask and then hold down the Option or Alt key, and that turns the Add and Subtract buttons into the Intersect button. And now we want to intersect that with the brush. And now you can see that nothing has happened so far. And that can be a bit confusing because first the mask will stay the way it is even if we intersect it with the brush. And now if I make any adjustments with the panel on the right hand side, everything in the whole bird will be adjusted, but it doesn't matter because in the end, only the areas I brush on will actually be adjusted. I want to add a little bit of exposure and also pull up the shadows. So let's jump over here to the right hand side. We're just going to lift the exposure a little bit, and I'm only looking at the dark areas on the crest and the belly now. And then I'm also lifting the shadows a bit. And then I'm going over to my brush here, make it a fairly large size, a fairly big feather as well, with sort of 50% flow. And now you see the whole bird is bright, but once I start brushing, it will only brush it into those areas I brush on. And because we have intersected the brush with the select subject, I cannot accidentally brush onto the background. So now we can just go in here and you see the bird is all dark again. And we're just going to brush on certain areas that need a little bit of brightness. And if we click this on and off now, you can see that with just a few small changes, we've dramatically changed the look of our image. And to me, this is one of the most powerful ways to edit in Lightroom because we can basically brighten or darken anything we want on our subjects. For instance, if I wanted to go further, I could darken parts of the black and the back of the bird to make it even more stand out. I could add a little bit dehaze, or I could clean up the colors on the bird, or with the same simple tool of select subject and then intersecting it with the brush. And just like that, within minutes, we took a dark, dull, noisy photo and gave it a great look, feel, and overall balance. When it comes to image editing, it's important to remember that what your images look like is totally up to you. I like my photos bright and vibrant, but you may like the opposite. But in the end, that doesn't really matter. What matters is that you learn the right tools and techniques that allow you to transform all your raw files in the way you want them to look like and end up with great final images that make you very happy and also make the editing process quite joyful for you. And that's exactly what I teach in my masterclasses as well. No matter what style you like, it will give you the foundation to do fantastic edits with all your files. And now I would love to hear from you guys in the comments. How is image editing for you? Is it a big task? Is it something you look forward to or something you try to avoid? And what are your biggest issues when it comes to image editing? Is it knowing what to do or sorting through thousands of photos? Let me know in the comments. Also check out my channel membership and masterclasses. Give me the thumbs up and of course hit that subscribe button, and I'll see you guys in another video very soon. Bye.